them to function, if merely for the benefit of the cameras. But not enough to push them over the brink, you see. One-take wonders, like the aforementioned Jan Michael Vincent, can be propped up in front of cameras until the day their liver explodes, their last ancillary market is exploited, and they become yesterday's tabloid news. Or until they break their neck in a car wreck, as Vincent did recently. If they're luckier, like recovering cocaine addict Gary Busey, they get a chance to cycle through the Hollywood system again and again, making more comebacks than mere mortality can explain. Now, unlike some no less tragic has-been actors, the fiercely talented Greene, he delivers. Marginally talented or charismatic screw-ups are a dime a dozen, but a true junkie artist is a rarity. And in Hollywood, such creatures are deified for living outside of the lines of self-control and responsibility until an industry of celebrity winds up flourishing around their tombstones. During filming on The Usual Suspects, Greene luxuriously improvised a memorable filmic moment by flicking a lit cigarette into Stephen Baldwin's face. Suspects writer Christopher McQuarrie calls Greene, quote, a $1 million day player, which could be translated as get him in, nail the money shot, and get him out before he wreaks havoc. Nick Gomez, director of Greene's seminal turn in Laws of Gravity, says, I really do put him on the same kind of intuitive, instinctive, real gut-edgy outsider level of someone like Robert De Niro. Peter's emotional life is so resonant and so close to the surface that he doesn't know how to work any other way. That's his strength as an actor, which at the same time is his weakness as an individual and makes him a political monster in a town that eats you alive. The Rich Man's Wife director, Holden Jones, says, Peter is terrific in the movie. There's no doubt about it. You can't take your eyes off him when he's in a scene. He's a mercurial presence. The camera loves him. He does unexpected and wonderful things. She pauses. And he's scary as hell. Caravan Pictures' decision to cast Greene in The Rich Man's Wife did not come easily, given a reputation passed down from producer to producer, casting agent to casting agent. Some stories were real, others imagined. Yes, he was found huddled in a closet clutching a crack pipe on Judgment Night. No, he's not a murderer. Yes, he had trouble getting into Canada to do a film, given his criminal record, a prior each for assault and drug possession. But when Holden Jones witnessed a spectacular reading by the actor, she insisted to the skeptical suits upstairs, I don't care about the stories, I want him. For those on the outside, it seems incredible that someone could survive the daily abuse that Peter Greene inflicted upon himself. But Greene not only survived, he worked day in, day out on film after film. Greene's addiction remained unchecked, and not a day's filming was ever lost. But after 15 years and increasing dosages, it was getting harder and harder to punch the clock. When production of The Rich Man's Wife began, Greene's ability to function and his delusion that he was well nigh indestructible was almost completely eroded. By the second week of shooting in Seattle, Greene was mainlining at least 1/10 of an ounce of heroin a day in his trailer. He was getting strung out. He couldn't maintain. His two co-conspirators, a personal assistant, that would be me, hung ready 24/7, and a makeup girl who literally covered his tracks with cakey flesh-tone makeup, were losing their grip on an actor who was losing his mind. He had to either kick or quit the film. Jump-starting his withdrawal from heroin, Greene actually fell from his trailer, an unscripted stunt that conveniently aggravated an old back injury. Trembling and moaning, he hobbled to the set to begin a day of intense physicality, insisting on suffering through the scene work. Hours passed before a doctor arrived on the set, administered a mini-exam, then reluctantly wrote a prescription for the minimal 10 pain-killing Percodans and a muscle relaxer called Flexeril. In front of dumbfounded producers, Greene railed, "That doctor's a quack. I want 50 Percodan." Well, the doctor advised, if he doesn't get drowsy on what I've prescribed, he's addicted to them. The doctor also noticed a burn in a very strange location, the crook of Greene's arm. That was, in fact, where he had been shooting up a dozen times a day. Greene had literally poured boiling water onto his flesh to hide his track marks, which until then had been camouflaged with makeup. No stranger to detox, Greene this time got to go through the grueling, loin-clawing withdrawal in a studio-financed hotel room with the aid of prescribed meds and a dose of methadone shipped in. The first night was hell. A sleepless crew member was aroused in the room above him, and he reported that Greene was up all night, pacing and stomping around the room, punching walls and intermittently haranguing his agent by phone. "Get me off this movie. I don't care what you have to do." Well, he didn't get off the movie, but he was off heroin, at least for the moment. He continued to self-medicate, downing at least a fifth of Wild Turkey 101 from the moment he came to the instant he passed out. Despite his frequent assertions that he wanted to get help, it was as if he was marking time until he could get back to L.A., where the whole thing would start up again. Once back on his own, he tailspinned. He began chasing booze with crack, scored on Hollywood street corners where dealers lurked, hiding rocks in their mouths, waiting for buyers to spit them out. Greene was still managing to make his moments in front of the camera work. It was then during the last week of shooting, while in his cups at a Hollywood bar, that Greene was told of Clayton Brooks's suicide. It was the worst thing that could have happened. The rich man's wife rapped, Greene's surrogate movie family disintegrated, and Greene stumbled off to the Viper Room, more accurately, the sidewalk outside the Viper Room, where night after night he'd sit, losing his mind again, his trembling hands trying to vice grip the voices inside his skull. Greene's agent dumped him for missing appointments. Well, it wasn't a great loss. Offers weren't exactly pouring in, and Greene was in no condition to read, let alone work. Checks by his few remaining friends found the desiccated Greene practically decomposing in his apartment. They begged him to leave and get to a treatment center now. He made promises that he would check in tomorrow. Junkies are like that. I'll quit tomorrow, they say, but they never stop until they've reached their own personal bottom of unfathomable demoralization, hopelessness, and despair. Greene was ready to quit, but he didn't admit himself into rehab. He checked into the Chateau Marmont. Chatting with his perfectly suburban mother offers few clues as to how Peter Greene got to that place. By her account, his New Jersey childhood was charmed. Greene's siblings lead conventional lives. His younger brother, John, he's a Wall Street broker, and his younger sister, Mary Ann, is a married nurse. Mrs. Greene, Greene adds the extra E for his Screen Actors Guild card, recalls some average suburban window-breaking episodes and reveals that while an altar boy, Peter was ousted for a while for lifting the priest's cassock during Mass. She also remembers his kindness to younger children and animals and to those less fortunate. More than once, he brought homeless men he found at the rectory to the dinner table for a meal. This Italian mom had the standard doctor-lawyer aspirations for the son she called Errol Flynn. Her son didn't reveal his own ambitions. Instead, he dropped out of Montclair High School and began his schooling on the streets of Manhattan at 15. Greene's first job as a busboy didn't last long. He was fired for stealing chickens. So what? The big city was full of new adventures, running from the mole people in the labyrinth of storm sewers and subway tracks below Times Square, then surfacing to bathe in the bustling humanity of Grand Central Station. Broke. He was too embarrassed to go home. Fleeting comfort came from jaunts to Union Square Park, scoring a couple of nickel bags of pot, rolling it all up into joints. He'd then dash up to Times Square and lose himself in a marijuana haze deep inside a refrigerated movie house. And then he found work. A hooker subcontracted him as a pot delivery boy in and around Manhattan. He was soon making good money and brushing elbows with West Side Irish and Italian gangsters. The hooker, she had no qualms about banging her johns in front of him or introducing him to more powerful drugs than pot. Once, she got him loaded on angel dust and he landed almost comatose on her bedroom floor. All he could see was a mirror over her bed and her screwing some Hell's Angels thug in it. He spent his days on Washington Square Park benches near New York University. Despite having ditched the higher learning scene, he constantly remembered something his mother once told him. The more you know, the more you can imagine. He took to stealing books from students in the park. One day, Greene was confronted by a nutty professor who was wise to his pilfering. "If you're going to steal a book," asked the older academic, "why marketing?" The sidewalk student looked down, and sure enough, in his hands was Marketing and Bookkeeping, a textbook. The professor took him under his wing. Now, the prof was no chicken hawk, as Greene first suspected, merely a stoned-out eccentric whose Soho loft was lined with books and drugs for Greene's consumption. Greene was 16 when the professor injected him with cocaine for the first time. One snowblind night, Greene found some LSD in a little oriental box stashed on a bookshelf. The trip he took that evening found portraits of Jesus jumping to life from the walls, talking to him. Greene broke an arm and didn't even know it. And soon after that, Greene's benefactor met his maker, unceremoniously dying of an overdose, leaving his now more streetwise charge alone again. Until Greene hooked up with Kenny, a coke dealer just in from California. And before long, he and Kenny had the downtown after-hours scene locked and loaded on the quarter ounces of cocaine they were pumping to the club set via a network of bartenders. The duo's Gramercy Park apartment was furnished with shoeboxes full of cash. With money and coke came girls proffering blowjobs in bar bathrooms and providing breakfast companionship in 14th Street greasy spoons. The ride couldn't last. Kenny, who had been leading a closeted gay lifestyle, was murdered in the apartment by some rough trade he'd picked up in the thickets of Central Park. Greene was hauled in as a suspect in his partner's murder, but he passed a lie detector test and subsequently graduated to the big time, dealing with and for a Colombian cartel. Greene, at 20, was a strikingly handsome, gun-toting, drug-running menace, nearly wed to a French-Spanish beauty, a beauty queen, in fact, Elizabeta Núñez. She needed some immigration papers. He needed a translator for his dealings with